Welcome back to Bracket Science, where we dissect everything around the college basketball world. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Brandon Jadich. We have had a busy week of college basketball. We've had some top 25 matchups. We had a crazy start to Big East play with a lot of upsets going on throughout the college basketball world. As always, thanks again for tuning in. Let's dive right into it, starting with some of these Big East matchups. Let's start with Tuesday. Tuesday night was a big night of college hoops. The first game we want to talk about was number 6 Marquette visiting Providence, and Providence beat them on their home floor 72-57. Providence now moves to 10-2 on the year after this upset, while Marquette moves down to 9-3. Amica Pavilion was rocking. It is one of the toughest environments to visit in the sport, and Marquette found this out the hard way. For Providence, it was Devin Carter. He had 22 points, 8 rebounds on 6 of 10 shooting, and was 5-9 from 3. Very efficient. And this Providence team also held Oso Ighodaro, one of Marquette's most important players. They held him to only attempting 6 shots. He's one of the best bigs in the Big East, and to hold him to only 6 shots is great. Tyler Kolek, the Big East preseason player of the year, did have 21 points, but it just strictly was not enough to hold off this Providence team. It's really not that shocking that Providence won. I can see it happening on their main floor. Great environment. It's just how badly they won. They won this game by 15, and it was not close the entire way. Providence has built up a pretty good resume so far this year. Their 2 losses came to Kansas State, which was in overtime. Then they did get blown out by Oklahoma, but as we have found out that Oklahoma is a very good basketball team. Providence now has wins over Wisconsin and Marquette. Marquette is in Wisconsin. They just seem to own the state of Wisconsin, as it seems. But Marquette now has losses to Purdue, Wisconsin, and now Providence. Providence building a very similar resume to Marquette, and many people had Marquette as a 2 seed coming into this game. Not that big of a difference in the resumes there. The Big East is going to be so fun to watch this year. This was a great start. We'll talk about a few other games that went on to start Big East play. But these teams know coming in and week out throughout the Big East in conference play, it's going to be a test no matter what. This league is so deep this year. Let's move on to a top 25 matchup that occurred on Tuesday. It was number 22 Virginia visiting number 23 Memphis, the red-hot Memphis Tigers, and Memphis blew them out 77-54. David Jones for Memphis has turned into an absolute star. He is on All-American watch for sure. He had 26 points on 8 of 15 shooting. Memphis has now beaten 3 ranked teams in a row. These were Texas A&M when they were ranked. They're not ranked anymore, but Clemson and then Virginia. Their lone losses have come to Ole Miss, who is still undefeated, and Villanova in the championship of that Battle for Atlantis tournament. Penny Hardaway is putting together a great squad. This is his best team he's had. Questions have been circling whether Memphis could really be a national contender. Could this team really win it all? This team seems to have all the pieces. They have David Jones. He turned the corner of stardom this year. He's averaging 21 a game, 6.3 rebounds, and 2.2 steals. He looks legit. They also have the veteran presence of point guard Javon Quinterly. He's 25 years old, may I remind you. He's averaging 5 assists per game, in that point guard role. Caleb Mills comes off the bench. He's their 3rd leading scorer. They have Malcolm Dandridge, who's one of the most physical players. He isn't that involved right now. He's only playing about 15 minutes a game, but once he continues to get better, this team will be even more physical and more dominant. And by the way, they get Naquan Tomlin to start practicing this week for this Memphis squad. For those who do not know who Naquan Tomlin is, he was the starting center for Kansas State last year, that team that made an Elite 8 run. He averaged 10.4 points per game and 6.4 rebounds per game on the year last year. He will add height to an already big team. And quite frankly, Memphis really shouldn't lose a game for a long time going forward. Looking at their schedule, they take on Vanderbilt and Austin Peay. That's their last non-conference play. And then the AAC is pretty weak in general until they play, of course, FAU. FAU was projected to win the conference by a mile. Now it seems 50-50 whether it be Memphis or FAU. But they don't play FAU until February 25th. Now they may have some trouble running through the AAC. They have SMU, Wichita State. If they play at either of these programs, they'll still be favored to win, I believe, but it may be a tough environment. They're not going to win every game, especially with FAU, but they have a strong chance to win a lot of games. If they were to go, say, 17-3, 18-2 in conference play, I don't see how anyone could hold them out from being anywhere in between a 1 and a 4 seed right now. They really have built up such a good non-conference resume that this team's seed will be very good come March if they take care of business in the AAC. But enough about Memphis. Let's talk a little bit about Virginia. We know Virginia is one of the best coached teams in the nation with Tony Bennett. And they have some of the best defensive players in the nation, one of the best defenses in the nation in general. But the problem is their offense. When they go cold, they go really cold. We saw this in this game against Memphis. We saw it in that game against Wisconsin where they were held to 41 points. When they're scoring the ball, they can be one of the best teams in the nation. We saw this against Syracuse and Texas A&M where they just played their own game. They dominated the entire game. But Virginia only has two guys averaging in double figures. This is Reese Beekman and Isaac McNeely. Isaac McNeely was not a factor in this Memphis game. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the ACC. He didn't make one. They currently rank third in the nation in defense at KenPom and 146th in offense, which just shows what the problem is for this Virginia Cavaliers squad. They start ACC play with Notre Dame and Louisville, who are both just atrocious. So they should get off to a good start in league play. And you know Tony Bennett will get his squad together and they will make a tough game for the Dukes, the UNCs, the Miamis, even the Clemsons. Memphis, great win. Let's move on to a game, the first game of the Jumpman Invitational, which was Florida and Michigan. And this game went into double overtime. It was a crazy game. Florida ended up winning 106-101. It was about as good of a first game as you can get in a mid-season tournament or classic, I guess it would be. And both teams were in search of are still currently in search of an at-large bid. And it was obvious that Michigan was the team who needed it a little bit more than Florida. Florida has built up a little resume. Michigan has not. And Florida knocked down Michigan 106-101 to move Michigan to 6-6 on the year. Rough start. It was neck and neck the entire game, but a huge three by Zion Pullen sent the game to double overtime, and then in double overtime it was just all the Gators. Michigan was deflated. Walter Clayton Jr. hit a dagger and just ended Michigan's hopes. It put Florida up by a big margin. Florida now moves to 8-3 on the year. Very good and comfortably in the tournament according to our bracketology right now. And Michigan, as we said, now 6-6 on the year and well out of the tournament. They are going to need a great Big Ten play. Nothing just can seem to go right for Michigan as of now. They lost the game in overtime to Florida. They lost the game in overtime to Oregon. They also have that 3-point loss to Indiana in Michigan. Tough loss there. A lot of close games. They could easily be 9-3 right now. Juwan Howard seems to be climbing up the hot seat just a little bit. He had an altercation that went viral with the team's strength coach. Now losing games, just not helping his case. They don't look good right now. Michigan has a lot of problems going on over there. They take on a very good McNeese team in Michigan looking to rebound after this game. McNeese, we have them in the tournament right now as a 13 seed. This McNeese team is very good. Well, I'm curious to see this game, see how good this McNeese team is, and see how Michigan plays them at home. But a good win there for the Florida Gators. So all this madness was going on. You look down at the bottom of the scoreboards, and Morehead State was beating up on Indiana at Indiana. They were off to a massive second half lead, but Indiana ended up winning the game 69-68. Morehead State is projected to win the OVC, and a win at Indiana could have really improved their seeding. We have them right now as a 15 seed. This could have moved them up to maybe a 14 or 13 seed. at Assembly Hall. That would have been a great win. Morehead State actually led 64-49 with 9 minutes left, and Indiana finished the game on a 20-4 run to somehow hold them off. Great finish by Indiana there. Indiana came off that devastating loss in that game that they, quite frankly, should have won against Kansas. But they're still fighting for a tournament bid, and they came out so flat in this game, even at home. This team's got a lot of things to figure out, or they're going to be figuring them out in the NIT tournament. They don't look like a tournament team as of right now. They are a bubble team. I don't have them on the bubble. I have them pretty far out right now. They don't look great. They got a lot of work to do, but they have a lot of talent, so we'll see how they do going forward. Let's move on to Wednesday, which was the big day of college basketball, the biggest day, starting with some Big East games that were shocking. Number 5, UConn visited Seton Hall, and Seton Hall beat them up 75-60. They absolutely stunned UConn. Kadari Richmond for Seton Hall was the leading scorer. He had 23 points. But the main story was Seton Hall's defense. They held UConn to 60 points, and we know how good UConn's offense is. This game was not close. Seton Hall led the entire way. Only 2 players were in double figures for UConn, and that was Tristan Newton and Donovan Clingan. But it was even worse news for UConn's Donovan Clingan. He left the game with an apparent ankle injury. They said afterwards that it was a sprained ankle, but it's something to keep an eye on. This definitely hurt UConn's chances winning this game. They looked deflated afterwards. They just looked like a worse team without Clingan on the floor. He makes such an impact, and it was tough to see him go down. Hopefully he can have a speedy recovery. We know how great he is. But Seton Hall, a great win. They start off Big East play with this huge W against the defending national champions. They look to continue this momentum on Saturday at Xavier in what will be another tough environment. For UConn, they also get a big test on Saturday, taking on Rick Pitino's St. John's squad. It is a home game for UConn. This game will be in Connecticut. The other Big East game that went on Wednesday night was Villanova visiting number 12 Creighton. Creighton coming off that win against Alabama, but the previous game before that, they lost to UNLV, a pretty rough UNLV team. And Villanova won this game in overtime, shocking the Creighton Blue Jays 68-66. What a huge win for Kyle Neptune and Villanova. Villanova was right on the bubble. We had them as one of the first 4 teams, and a road win against Creighton will go an extremely long way. Not only for their chances in the NCAA tournament, getting to the NCAA tournament, but for their confidence moving forward. This team needed a big win, and it was great to see them pull it out. The weird thing is that Creighton actually led this game by double figures most of the game. They led by double figures at halftime. They led by 14 in the second half at one point. Then all of a sudden, Creighton just went ice cold, and Eric Dixon for Villanova went ballistic. He finished with 32 points on 12 of 21 shooting. Yes, he had 32 of Villanova's 68 points. He also hit a huge 3 in overtime to give Villanova their first lead in what felt like forever, since early in the first half. I don't even know if they ever led in this game until then. They tied it up, but Kyle Neptune is someone to thank for saving his job. It's without a doubt Eric Dixon. He just carried Villanova to a victory against Creighton. Let's talk a little bit about Creighton and their struggles. They're very out of sorts right now. They're such a veteran squad, which makes it strange. Baylor Shireman is without a doubt Creighton's best player, their most important player. He had 16 points and 11 rebounds, but he was just very inefficient all game. 5 for 17 from the field, 0 for 7 from 3. And he's one of the best free throw shooters in the nation, and he missed some big free throws throughout the game, very unlike him. One of the purest strokes in college basketball, and it was strange watching him miss free throws. He's one of those where he shoots it and you feel like he should make just about everything. This was a tough one for him, and Creighton just quite frankly has not shot the ball well as of late. This one they shot 40% from the field, only 21% from 3. Not a good shooting performance for Creighton. So put all these Big East games together, and what do you have? UConn, Marquette, and Creighton all tied for last in the Big East. Who would have seen that coming? It's only one game, I know. And these teams will without a doubt rebound. They have so much talent. It's just interesting to note the defending national champion, the preseason favorite to win it in Marquette, and an Elite 8 team from last year in Creighton, returning most of their stars and all lost their first Big East game. This shows how good this conference is going to be this year. That is incredible. Let's step away from the Big East and move on to some of the ranked matchups we saw. And the two ranked matchups were ACC Big 12 matchups, starting with number 10 Baylor and number 21 Duke in Madison Square Garden, where Duke picked up their first really quality win, even with Tyrese Proctor not playing due to injury. Duke won 78-70. This was a very aesthetically pleasing game to watch. Both teams looked very good, very talented, well coached. All 5 Duke starters were in double figures. They were led by Jared McCain. He had 21 points. Kyle Filipowski continued his great season by adding another double-double, 13 points and 10 rebounds. And Jeremy Roach, what can you say about him? He played all 40 minutes, scored 18 points, ran point guard very well in this game. It was back and forth all night. Baylor got down early, then took the lead with the help of Yves Missi, who had his best game of his college career with 11 points, 10 rebounds. He was just unstoppable in the first half. It was actually the first game that his parents have ever watched him play basketball, high school or college, so this was kind of cool for him to have such a big game. Ray J. Dennis was Baylor's leading scorer, the transfer from Toledo. He had 17 points on 7 of 15 shooting. Baylor has now dropped back-to-back games against good teams, Michigan State and Duke. Baylor seems up to question for how good this team really is. Really haven't been challenged that much. They did beat Auburn in their first game of the year, which we're finding out now is even a better win now than we thought it was back then. We'll find out their true character come Big 12 play. For Duke, this was a huge win, get some much-needed momentum moving into their ACC conference play. Let's move on to the second game of Big East, or Big 12 ACC play, in the second ranked matchup of the night, and also the second game of the Jumpman Invitational. First game was Florida-Michigan. Second game the next night was North Carolina and Oklahoma. Number 11, North Carolina, and number 7, Oklahoma. North Carolina led the ACC to a 2-0 finish against these Big 12 teams, holding Oklahoma to their first loss of the year. Game was played in Charlotte, which is technically a neutral site game, but definitely favored the Tar Heels. North Carolina won the game 81-69. R.J. Davis continued his dominant season with tied for a game-high 23 points. The other came from Otega Owa from Oklahoma. Davis is now averaging 21.7 on the year and is one of the best free throw shooters in the nation, which is so crucial for this North Carolina squad. He shoots it at 95%. It's such an advantage coming down the stretch. They can just give him the ball, and he is essentially automatic from the free throw line. As of right now, he would be my vote for first-team All-American in the point guard or shooting guard position, whichever way you view him. I would have him just ahead of Tristan Newton and even just ahead of Tyler Kolek. Armando Bacot also had a solid game. He added 14 points and 8 rebounds. North Carolina started off hot. They got off to a 14-2 start and strictly didn't look back the entire way. Oklahoma is a good team. They fought hard. They just couldn't match North Carolina's size and talent. They dropped to 10-1 on the year, while North Carolina is now 8-3 on the year. North Carolina has some quality wins over Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Their losses have come to Kentucky, UConn, and Villanova, who are 3 blue bloods. UNC is legit. They are a team to be dealt with this year. The ACC is going to be fun to watch this year. It's leaning towards Duke and North Carolina being the teams to beat, which was projected in the preseason. Both teams look really good, and it's always fun when both those teams are in competition and they meet up for the biggest rivalry in college basketball. Along with there are some surprise teams who have a chance to win the ACC, including Clemson, everyone's favorite team. Everyone seems to love Clemson. They just do it right over there. I love Clemson. I'm rooting for them this year. After Virginia's bad loss to Memphis, it's hard to see them competing with Duke, North Carolina, Clemson, and even Miami. We'll see. Maybe Miami can sneak into the conversation if they get their stuff figured out. We know how talented they are. But the ACC is going to be fun to watch. The 2 Blue Bloods and Clemson, just America's team, if you can call them that. But nevertheless, a great win for North Carolina in Oklahoma's first loss. The late game of the night. On the East Coast, it started at 11 o'clock. It was Alabama taking on number 4 Arizona. This game took place in Arizona. It was technically a neutral site, but it was an Arizona home game, basically. We saw the same thing with Arizona State. Arizona rebounded from their loss against Purdue by beating Alabama 87-74. Once again, Arizona so balanced in their scoring. All 5 starters were in double figures. Keishai Johnson had 11, Omar Ballo 16, Kylan Boswell 15, Pelly Larson 16, and Caleb Love 13. But the story of the game for Arizona was their defense. We know how good Alabama's offense is. Alabama actually came into the game with the number 1 offense at KenPom, and Arizona held them to 34% shooting and only 20% from 3. Great defense played by the Wildcats. Alabama now falls to 6-5 on the year, but they have played such high-quality competition that they have some of the best losses in the country. They've lost to Arizona, number 4 in the poll, Purdue, number 1 in the poll, Ohio State, who's a top 30 KenPom team, Creighton, which this loss is not looking as good anymore, but Creighton's still loved by the computers. They're a top 15 KenPom team, and Clemson, who has been great all year. Good losses, if you can say so, for Alabama. It'll be interesting to see how the committee views them come March with these losses, if they were to be a bubble team. I currently have them as a first 4 team in our bracketology right now. We'll see how SEC play goes for them. They have played close games, which is what makes it frustrating. I want to see this Alabama team succeed because I think they have a lot of talent, but they need to pull off just one huge win. For Arizona, they will move on and they will finish their gauntlet of a non-conference schedule against number 14 Florida Atlantic on Saturday in Phoenix. That will be, without a doubt, a great game. Let's move on to last night, Thursday. Not a great slate, only one game worth noting. It was number 9 Kentucky visiting Louisville, and Kentucky took care of them, no doubt about it. 95-76. Kentucky scored 53 points in the first half. Louisville has just become absolutely laughable. But nevertheless, it's still a road win for Kentucky. Kentucky stays very strong, even with this young team. Antonio Reeves just went off. He had 30 points on 10 of 16 shooting, 4 for 5 from 3. He had 22 in the first half. As I said, Kentucky scored 53 in the first half. It was just a blowout from the get-go, as expected. They also got 18 and 12 from Trey Mitchell. And Reed Shepherd, so good. He had 11 points and 11 assists. A freshman with 11 assists. So incredible. Louisville now has like 2 weeks until their next game, just under 2 weeks. And now it's just time to move on from Kenny Payne. Let someone else take over during this break and hope to rebuild at least a little bit, get some momentum, get something right going for this program. It used to be such an elite level program. They're supposed to hire. Maybe they can figure something out internally first. It's time to move on, though. I expect him to be fired no later. They might let him have Christmas. Might let him have an enjoyable Christmas, and then as soon as Christmas is over, he should be gone. But we'll see how Louisville handles this situation. Good win for Kentucky, though, for their in-state rivals. Now let's talk about some of the mid-major games, mid-major madness that went on throughout the world. Starting on Tuesday, CSU Northridge visited UCLA and beat them 76-72. UCLA had the longest win streak at home at 29 games, and they lost it to CSU Northridge. I am quite frankly speechless about UCLA this year. We knew they weren't going to be as good as last year, losing some important players, but come on now. CSU Northridge, nothing against CSU Northridge. This is a great win for them, and they're actually 8-3 on the year. Not to be so negative, but the story here is UCLA. What is happening to this UCLA Bruins program? They're now 5-5 on the year. They've lost 4 of their last 5. The one win that they got was over a UC Riverside team who's 4-7. By the way, UCLA won that game by 1 and hit a shot which was near the buzzer to win this game. They, quite frankly, shouldn't have even won that game in a home game against a 4-7 team. They haven't beaten a notable opponent all year. They have just about no shot of making the NCAA tournament unless they were to win the Pac-12, which is going to be very difficult with Arizona. CSU Northridge, what a win. Let's move on to Wednesday. starting with UC Irvine visited the New Mexico Lobos, and UC Irvine got beat 65-78. New Mexico stays hot. UC Irvine's expected to win the Big West, but it was just no match for this good New Mexico team. New Mexico's off to an 11-1 start. The Mountain West is very great watch this year. Let's just talk about some of the standings in there. Let's look through them. New Mexico is 11-1. Utah State also 11-1. Colorado State is 10-1. They've been a surprise team this year. Nevada's 10-1. They beat Temple by 1,000,000 yesterday. San Diego State's 9-2. Boise State 8-3. What a conference! This is going to be a multi-bid conference for sure. We have 3 of them in. We have New Mexico in. Utah State is a first 4 for us right now. Colorado State in. Nevada in. San Diego State in. We have 4 teams in our tournament right now, with Utah State being on the bubble. There could potentially be 5 teams from the Mountain West in the NCAA tournament. Great stuff from the Mountain West Conference. A game a lot of people were keeping an eye on was Purdue-Fort Wayne visiting Pitt. Purdue-Fort Wayne will be battling with Youngstown State for the Horizon League title this year, but Pitt was too much for them. Pitt won 62-48. Thought this game was going to be a little bit closer, but Pitt's defense was just too much for Purdue-Fort Wayne. Pitt is right on the bubble right now. They're one of our next 4 out, so this is a pretty good win for this Pitt squad. Longwood visited NC Central. Longwood's supposed to win the Big South this year. This is a pretty tough loss against a 500 NC Central team going into league play. It was at NC Central. Longwood suffers their second loss of the year. Longwood will be battling it out with Radford in the Big South. It could go 50-50 either way. Longwood is favored right now. And Radford actually went into West Virginia in Morgantown on Wednesday and beat West Virginia. West Virginia is off to a horrific start. They're 4-7 on the year without the legendary Bob Huggins. Very tough start for this West Virginia team with the loss over Radford. So that is some of our mid-major madness that went on over the last couple days. Let's get into our hierarchy of hoops. For those who don't know, we rank our top 32 teams every single show, and I will say this was the hardest one to do so far this year. Just so many teams around that 27 to 37 range. Tough week to do this. Let's start up at the top though. Purdue, obviously number 1. I have Arizona back at number 2. I still think Arizona is the best team in the nation. That game they lost to Purdue was at Purdue. I think they're the most talented team in the nation. We'll see how it goes going forward. We have Houston at 3, Kansas at 4, and we only dropped UConn to number 5. I still think UConn is a top 5 team in the nation. We have Kentucky at number 6, and we kept Marquette at number 7. We're giving them the benefit of the doubt, just ahead of North Carolina at 8, Tennessee at 9, and Illinois wrapping up the top 10 at number 10. We moved Memphis all the way up to number 11, and their fellow AAC competitor, Florida Atlantic, to number 12. We moved Duke up to 15, Baylor down to 16, Oklahoma down to 17, and we also moved Creighton all the way down to 24. So let's get into some of the teams that were on the bubble. Ole Miss is right there at 26, Ohio State at 27. We still have Miami, Florida. I am biased towards Miami, Florida. I've liked them from the beginning of this year. I still think they have it. They've gotten blown out by Colorado and Kentucky. I still think they have all the pieces to be a great team. At 29, a little bit controversial, we moved Villanova into our 29 spot. They just have such quality wins. They have bad losses, but quality wins. I think they're deserving of being in the conversation of the top 32 teams in the nation. Texas A&M is at 30. At 31, we moved Northwestern. Northwestern, after that horrible loss to Chicago State, everyone just started counting them out, but they've rebounded greatly. They beat Arizona State in Phoenix by 100, it felt like. Northwestern is a good team. Boo Buie is a great player. And at 32, we have the mid-major team, Princeton. Princeton has looked great all year, obviously, with their lone loss coming at St. Joe's in a very close game. We did mark down 5 other teams that just didn't feel fair not to mention. Next up at 33, we would have had Providence. Providence, after that win against Marquette, they'll be tested against Butler. We'll see if they win that game. I think they'll move into our top 32. At 34, we would have Dayton. Dayton looks really good out of the A-10. They beat up on Cincinnati. They've looked really good as of late. Then we still have Alabama in that 35 spot just because of how close their games have been. We have Pitt at 36. Pitt has looked really good as of late. Hinson is one of the best players in college basketball. We would have Pitt there. And then 37th, we would have Michigan State. This isn't based on resume. This is just gut feeling on who we believe are the best teams in the nation. And Michigan State is finally starting to look the part. We would have them at 37 right now. Let's talk about some of the upcoming games to look forward to over this Christmas weekend. Starting on Friday, we have some more Big East action. Georgetown visits number 6 Marquette. Marquette looks to rebound against Providence's old coach, Ed Cooley, in some Big East play. Look forward to that game. Yale visits Kansas, Don't know where that came from. This game takes place in Allen Fieldhouse. It shouldn't be much of a game. Kansas should win by a lot. The game of Friday is Illinois, number 13 team in the nation, visiting Missouri. Missouri will, without a doubt, be a tough test for Illinois. It'll be a tough environment. We have Missouri as a current bubble team, currently in our next 4 out. So this win would go a long way for Missouri against a top 13 team. And for those of you who like to watch bad basketball, but like to watch big name basketball, Maryland at UCLA. Maryland comes in at 7-4, UCLA 5-5, and both teams have lost some bad games. This may be a rough watch. I will not be tuning into this game, but it is 2 mainstream teams, so it is worth noting. Let's move on to Saturday, and Saturday is the big day. Starting with Butler and Providence, who we talked about earlier. The game is at Providence, and both teams enter 10-2 and are atop the Big East standings. Both teams have exceeded expectations by a mile so far this year. So this should be a good one to watch. This should be a very close, very good basketball game. Next up, we have Mississippi State at Rutgers. Both teams semi-near the bubble. Mississippi State's comfortably in for us, and Rutgers is not. They're not even in our bubble watch as of now. They need some big wins to be considered come March. This will definitely be a tough environment at Rutgers. We'll see how this game goes. The game of the day, number 4 Arizona and number 14 FAU. Omar Valo taking on Vlad Golden. It's a matchup to watch. This finishes both teams' tough non-conference schedules. Both teams will really not be tested for a while, so this is the last huge game going into Christmas. The game is technically a neutral site, but it's going to be played in Phoenix, which is essentially a home game for Arizona. Expect this game to be an absolute shootout. Both teams so fast-paced. Both teams are so fast in general. Arizona's currently 6th on offense at KenPom, and FAU is 8th. This will obviously be a huge game for seeding come March. It'll just be a good game to watch. Expect this game to definitely both teams to reach the 80s unless it was a rare blowout. Final game we are going to talk about is St. John's at number 5 UConn. Rick Pitino's squad visiting an angry UConn team after suffering that loss to Seton Hall. This UConn environment will be rocking for their first home game of Big East play. Even with the students on Christmas break, this place will be electric. It will be important for the Huskies to see if Donovan Clingan will be able to give it a go, because St. John's has one of the best bigs in the nation, Joel Soriano. He's averaging 18 points, 11 rebounds. St. John's is no slouch whatsoever. They're 8-3 right now. They're currently in our next 4 out as well, along with Missouri. Thank you all for listening. This concludes our segment for the day. It was a busy week of college basketball. We have a semi-busy weekend highlighted by Arizona and FAU this weekend. We will get back after Christmas, so we hope all of our listeners have a great and Merry Christmas. We will be back with our bracketology on the 27th. Everyone spend time with your family. Enjoy the holidays. Follow us on Twitter at Bracket Science with 2 S's. on Facebook at Bracket Science, 2 words. And feel free to like our podcast and follow our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple, Google, and YouTube. Thanks again for listening. Everyone have a great rest of their week and a great holiday. See ya.